Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, automate tasks, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Ray Florio, the president and CEO of Strategic Partners New York. Ray's career journey is a powerful demonstration of challenging the status quo and strategic leadership, spanning decades in top-tier consulting firms like Accenture. After a pivotal shift driven by a desire to bring judgment and true problem-solving to clients, Ray now leads Strategic Partners New York, a global firm that leverages AI to streamline processes, freeing up human resources and focus to critical insights and judgment. His expertise in strategic consulting, market disruption, and the careful integration of technology offers a powerful blueprint for leaders navigating today's complex business landscape. Ray, welcome to The Growth Shift.
Thank you for having me, David, and thank you as well for making me sound so great.
Hey, you've done all the work, came straight from your mouth. I'm just putting it together in a nice little story, let's call it. Right? It's great to have you on the show today. Your journey began in a top-tier consulting firm, Accenture, right? From there, I think maybe your path took a direction that you weren't initially anticipating. Tell us a little bit more about that foundational journey and, how your consulting career really played out.
No, of course. And I will say, I was really proud and really happy to start my consulting career in Accenture. It's a fantastic place to be, provide an excellent training ground, especially as somebody new to the industry. And I had a fantastic time there, got to tackle some really great client problems, get to have exposure across a number of industries, a number of functional areas. All of it was really in the strategy space, but pretty soon you find yourself when you're looking at, okay, we're getting around partner level, spent a decade here. Now I'm part of a giant end-to-end firm. You know that you can continue your career, but will you have as big of an impact playing in one functional area there in a multi-billion dollar firm, or will you find a smaller firm to be more of a home to you where you can have a greater influence and greater impact over the results in the short term? And that was about the same time that I received a call from, at the time, IRI, which later became Circana. And it was put to me this way that, hey, you know what? We have an excellent space in CPG, consumer packaged goods. But we end up having ourselves put down at more junior levels of the hierarchy in our clients because the big companies, the McKinseys, the Bains, the BCGs, the Accentures, the Carneys, all of that are coming in, buying our data, and then using that to actually help set directions with a data-driven approach and give some quantification and give some solid, actual, concrete facts behind all the frameworks and all the direction that they provide. And so the opportunity was to work with a number of different partners, myself from Accenture, another one from LEK and A.T. Kearney, another one from McKinsey, another one from BCG, and to go forth with creating our own strategy consultancy within the IRI and later Circana umbrella. And to me at the time, hey, you know what? I was looking to make my mark on the world. Sounded like a fantastic opportunity. And considering I stayed there for a decade, it really was. But all the good things come to an end. Not in the way that I make it sound that way, but in that eventually you start to look for more and you want to do the next thing. And truth be told, at that point, I was actually getting burned out on consulting. I'd been doing it for 20 years straight at that point. And one of the things that I had always noticed was, well, really two things. One was, we sell ourselves on the expertise, the strategic guidance, the fact that you have somebody who knows the ropes, who's been through it before, guiding you along the way. But then the day-to-day delivery, oftentimes it's part and parcel of the industry, gets handed off to a number of much more junior analysts. And I've had clients all throughout the 2 decades that I spent with other firms telling me, oh yeah, now that we've sold the project, you're going to have the school bus pull up. Well, that rubbed me the wrong way, and it was one of those comments that stayed with me over the years. The other thing was, many of these larger firms, whether they're industry specific or they're just massive, will actually work with quite a large number of direct competitors. And whether you actually are working across 2 or 3 different competitors in the same market or not, the perception from senior leadership is there that, hey, I do have to be a little bit guarded, because even if I have them under an NDA, even if I'm trusting that this one person isn't going to go to the other team working on my competitors and tell them everything, they're still training up new people. They're going to use stuff that I've actually shared with them as an examples, things like that. And you're a little bit guarded about what you'll say. You won't fully open up to your consultants about what's truly on your mind, what's truly in the future that you're still trying to formulate. And to really help your clients, you need to get access to that talk track and to be able to have that type of conversation. So when we actually created Strategic Partners New York, the goal was to solve for both of those issues. And that meant that, hey, I am going to continue to take a run at consulting. Yeah, I know there are other things that I had going on in life at the time, but, this proved to be my home. And that meant that we had to create ourselves quite a bit differently. And it meant, first and foremost, you're not going to get any junior resources. Anybody we put on a project is going to be that seasoned veteran. It's going to be the guy who has been working with, let's say, beverage alcohol since 2008. It's going to be the guy who, let's say, we're talking to paper goods, the guy who has been working across all sections of the value chain there. And quite honestly, it also meant that we would actually set in stone the key principle. We will not work with your direct competitors. Now, that's an interesting piece, because some people can take that too far, where they'll say, hey, if we work in CPG, we'll have one client in CPG, we'll have one client in industrial equipment, and one client in energy. That's not a model that works either, because you do need to be able to keep refreshing yourself on what's going on across multiple industries and multiple places within an industry. But that means for us, let's say we have a project with CVS and we're working with CVS. We won't work with Walgreens, but we would be willing to work with like Home Depot, which is not going to directly compete, but it will give us that continued exposure to things that are going on outside of that one client in the retail sector. And that gives you a little bit of the story of what Strategic Partners is and why we created it the way we did, and how we approach things a little bit differently here.
Yeah, Ray, it's been quite a journey that you've been on, right? 10 years at Accenture, 10 years at Circana following that, founding your own firm, leading your own firm now. You've learned a wealth of things along the way, exactly as you identify, starting at Accenture, starting at a larger firm, there's so much that you can learn, right? Just through the processes that are in place, the systems that they have, the exposure, right? The ability to, I suppose, move vertically or horizontally within the organization. But
absolutely,
you got to a point where you realized that, hey, maybe you weren't going to have the impact that you really were seeking out. So you moved to a smaller firm, you found impact, but now you're moving on to that next phase of impact as well, leading Strategic Partners New York. Through your time, right, through the decades in consulting, you've shifted.
Now you make me feel old.
You're just tenured. You've got pedigree. That's all I'm saying. Through everything that you've learned, Ray, right? You've made some pivots. You've made some impactful shifts and moves. What do you think was the most impactful lesson? What was that growth shift moment that you experienced which allowed you to think in this way and really develop the foundation for the approach that you're taking with strategic partners now?
Know when to ignore what's being said. And I know that's going to sound odd at first, but oftentimes what you'll find is that when you speak to a client, they don't at first know who you are. They don't know what you can do. They will often get accustomed to other providers who'll come. They'll provide something that is like neatly fits within a box. Hey, you need to know price elasticities. Yes, we'll do that. Here's what we do for that. That's what we're going to charge. Well, the key question you need to always be asking is, okay, why do you want price elasticities? Well, we want to know how we can make more money. Well, why do you think price elasticities are the right way of doing that? And then you get into a larger conversation, the conversation gets bigger and bigger, you challenge some of the underlying principles, and it allows you to bring your client to a better solution, and quite frankly, oftentimes a more cost-effective solution. It's not always about upselling, it's just about finding what's going to be the right answer for them that's going to get them the best impact for their value.
So really the focus on the person as part of the equation, right? Really, truly
Absolutely.
gaining a deep understanding, not just what people want, but why. Because a lot of people, I'm sure, lead with assumptions or surface level understanding
Yes.
of a problem that they have and a solution they want. But from a consulting perspective, once you really dive into that and uncover their true wants and desires, I'm sure things can often go in a different direction than they initially anticipated.
Yes, it does. And the sad thing is that many consultants out there have become very comfortable with just responding to the initial request. And it's led and trained clients to think in those terms as well, where we're in a point where we have to retrain them to think of us a little bit differently. And hey, tell us what's going on. How's business, more broadly speaking? And then we can work together with them to diagnose not just what the solution is, but even in many times, if you're doing it correctly, what the true problem is that you need to solve for as well.
Yeah, I love seeing how the consulting industry has evolved, continues to evolve and shift. And part of that next shift, of course, is AI, which is where I know you focus quite heavily at Strategic Partners New York. So what you're doing today, right? You're leading a global firm. You're leveraging AI to streamline processes, free up human resources, focus on critical insights and judgment. But tell us a little bit more, day to day. What are you actually doing with your clients?
Well, David, you have to have seen the thousands of LinkedIn posts that are all saying RIP McKinsey, and here are the 8 chat GPT prompts you have to use. And hey, if so many people are saying the exact same thing without any followers, these are brand new accounts, well, if even they can come to that conclusion, it must be true, right?
And the outputs can all look and sound exactly the same as well. So, I mean, no
Yeah,
differentiation.
exactly. It's interesting because you almost first want to start that type of conversation by talking about that assumption, because that's the big thing that's everybody's hearing out there right now. And it's interesting because all of it seems to rely on some very old standard frameworks like a SWOT analysis, a pricing strategy, things of that nature. And if that's all consulting really brought to the table, those frameworks, those approaches have all been public domain for decades. Why haven't they been doing it already themselves, and why are they actually hiring a consultancy? It's not because those consultancies are bringing those frameworks. They're bringing something much bigger to bear. And that's coming from the fact that if you think about it, when you hire a consultancy, you're not hiring them to execute an analysis. What you're hiring them for is when you're facing a disruption. And when I say that, think about if you face in your career a major market disruption. And think of this like, hey, you know what? I'm making food and beverage products and like cereals or things of that nature. And now the federal government wants me to put warning labels in the nutritional info on the front of the package. Or I'm making like hard beverages, alcoholic beverages, and all of a sudden people have started not drinking it anywhere near as much in the US. These are big market disruptions that people have to handle, and this is when you typically would hire the good consultancies because you think about you're working in-house and you've made your career in one of these companies that's facing this disruption. Over the course of your career, maybe you face a disruption like that 5, 6 times, or even a smaller disruption where, hey, you know what? Our competitors just brought out this brand new technology and they can't keep up. Happens, like I said, 5, 6 times over the course of your career. If you're a consultant, you see that 5 or 6 times a year working across multiple clients, working across different industries. And the fact that you've been through that and you've seen it that many times over and over again is the value we bring. Now, AI's role in this is an interesting one, because if you think about legitimately where it best plugs in, is it going to replicate that? Well, the answer short right now I'm saying, is no. And the reason for that is to know how to respond properly and to know how you actually go about this, then you need to know what good actually looks like and what success looks like in a contemporary setting. Meaning, I face this market disruption, what is my strategy to deal with it? And more importantly, what exactly should I consider as the key objectives over the next 3 to 5 years? When you know that, then you can start harnessing AI to bring together what are some of the small steps to get there once you've directed it to go in the right direction. But you need to set that overall framework and know what good looks like first. And I think I'm going to give you an example from the real world that we faced before. Now, there was a meat packer out there at one point, and they were famous for pork products. Now, what they wanted to know was, hey, we need to grow our business. And you do that unprompted, you get a response of, well, it seems like you have an opportunity to grow your ham business. Sounds great. I mean, ham is a very key product that you make if you're producing pork. And the way to do that, you cut the price by 10%. It will impact the margins on a per item basis, but the volume increase will be substantial enough that you'll be making more money overall and you'll be continuing to grow your business. Fantastic. Right now, everything I've told you sounds logical and it sounds like there's a good supporting evidence behind it, right? But then think about this. How do I actually create a ham? Well, there isn't a field of hams running wild on their own. There's actual hogs out there. You have to slaughter and butcher an entire hog. What happens with the non-ham products that come out of the hog? Well, it would actually have cost them incredibly more if they had sold more hams in an uneven way by taking on that strategy and taking on that approach. So what first appeared as good, once you have a more nuanced view, you know more about the industry, you know sort of the other things that you need to ask around it in order to make an appropriate decision, then you can take the full picture and provide the correct guidance.
Mm-hmm. So really,
I know that was a mouthful. I'll pause right there.
No. So really what you're doing, just to summarize that for the audience, is you're coming in and you're helping companies and, in industries that are going through disruptions, whether it's an industry wide or whether it's company and competitor specific. But you're using AI, yes, but more importantly, what you're doing is you're bringing critical insights, judgment, and human discernment into the process so that it's not just information that's being looked at, but how does this information need to be digested, processed, and used to actually make the right decisions moving forward. So, as you said, AI is great, but AI won't do that for a company accurately today, not in the same way that, a leading consultant can with the right type of discernment, right? So AI is coming in to help you streamline these processes, make them faster, and perhaps make them a little more accurate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I would add as well is a key barrier, even for the future, that we have to get over if we want AI to take a bigger role, is the simple fact that when I said what good looks like on a contemporary lens, what that really means is that in order to judge, hey, is this a sound strategy, either competitive strategy, pricing strategy, what have you, you have to be able to know what a good comprehensive version of that is, how it's worked before, and more importantly, what are all the nuances and details around that. Now, companies do not make those public. I mean, that's a simple fact. how can you train yourself and train your AI to know that if it can't look and see public examples? Those examples are going to come from consultants who've actually done it and created those, and they're proprietary. And those are going to either stay with the client or in-house within the consulting firm itself, where the firm is always going to be dominant on having that repository.
Ray, we're talking a lot about growth and strategy through disruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a major part or component, major focus of what you help your clients with. Today, the consulting industry broadly is also going through a disruption, right? We've mentioned
Yes.
AI a couple of times. Everyone's being affected by it. But when we're looking at, the nature of what consultants do, it's bringing insights and strategy and advice to companies to help them grow. So when we change the focus onto the consulting industry and the
Mm-hmm.
shift that we're going through right now, right, with growth in mind, consultants broadly are having a much more difficult time than ever when it comes to growth
Yes.
and client acquisition. AI is disrupting processes all across the board. It's, as you mentioned earlier, filling LinkedIn with a bunch of AI generated junk and such. It's making it more difficult than ever to attract the right type of clients to really need your help. When we look at strategic partners, New York today, through the disruption that the industry is experiencing, what is your approach to client acquisition for growth in today's market?
Sure. And I like that you asked the question because, when it comes right down to it, doctors always make the worst patients. So seeing consulting firms having to take their own advice, there's going to be some stumbling blocks. So we stick to a few major methods of client acquisition. The first and foremost, and it's a boon to us because all of our people are seasoned, where they have their own networks of people who know them and trust them. So we leverage that to start to speak to clients, get them to know us, and start to showcase that we are credible as that strategic advisor to them. That tends to be one of the best ways that we have. However, that's not the only way, obviously. The second method will actually come through thought leadership. What are we actually putting out there that's new and different and provocative and going to make people think differently? And that's an old method, but actually getting it out there and getting it in the hands of people who can benefit from it, you can actually leverage AI quite a bit more today. It used to be okay, you'd post it on social media. Now you can have a much more targeted approach where you actually send it to the right people at the right time. And more importantly, you can actually have it show up in the appropriate feeds at the right time as well, where you can actually analyze when is this person most likely to take a look? When are they going to actually be interested in this? Who is facing a challenge that could benefit from having a read here? And you have a much more targeted, much more filtered approach as a result, too. And you avoid that constant overbearing, hey, it's month 2 of the year. We've introduced our second thought leadership piece. Everybody take a look at this. You're not doing that. You're much more taking a surgical approach with a scalpel as opposed to, let's say, in some cases, what we've seen trying to do surgery with a rock.
Yeah, you know, Ray, exactly what you're saying right now, it ties back into that growth shift moment that you mentioned, right? The focus on the people as part of the process, especially in consulting,
It
right? And
does.
the core of consulting is people. And in 50 years, maybe in 10 years or 15, who knows? Maybe the consulting industry won't be around, right? I have a hard
Yeah.
time seeing that because, people and business are dependent on people. But in today's world, it's a requirement, right? Focusing on
Yeah.
humans, especially for client acquisition, lead generation, whatever you want to call it. But the approach that you're taking with focusing on thought leadership as well as on relationships, I think it is the most important, especially in a tech-driven world where there is so much AI and there is so much content. People are seeking out those real human interactions. So I love that focus and the approach that you guys are taking.
And I'm going to offer one that's going to be new that you may not have heard before that we do as well, which is, and this is specific to private equity firms. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the private equity landscape, but there isn't a huge repository of, hey, here are all the companies looking to be sold right now. You want to take a look and tell us which one you're interested in? Doesn't happen, and it never will happen right now. Because frankly, a lot of the people who are involved that would be willing to sell, they have to get approached before they even be willing to sell something or think about selling. So one of the interesting things that we'll do from time to time is we'll actually go out and take a poll of what's happening in a specific industry or marketplace. And for private equity firms that are on the smaller end, particularly that don't have a giant team that's looking at this all the time, talk to them about, hey, here are the companies that are out there that may be likely to go for a sale. Would you be interested in taking a deeper look at any of them? And you're going to them with something that's valuable. Hey, may not use us to take a look at it, but they know of us that way as someone who's willing to come to them and put something on the table that they can react to, as opposed to, hi, would you like to buy our merger and acquisition consulting services? Which I can guarantee you that sort of thing is not going to go anywhere.
I like this, right? You got to be able to think outside the box and be able to find new angles, new strategies, new approaches to connecting with the right people and finding the right opportunities, especially in today's environment, right? So you're taking a three-pronged approach when it comes to thought leadership, networking and relationships, as well as finding a new avenue to connecting, adding value, and finding opportunities. Where do you think the biggest challenges lie in consulting today when it comes to finding new approaches and connecting with the right opportunities?
So I think the biggest challenge today is the overall concept of what's happening with the junior level. Because for people to actually, and I'm talking about making long-term sustainable future for us, you need not only that junior level of talent to continually get trained up, but to actually build their network through a consulting firm over time for it to be at the right scale that you can actually deliver the proper results when you're a partner. And I think in the case of many of the larger firms, they're thinking about it a little bit differently than they should. And why I say that is because they're using AI as a means to start to pare down their staffing. We've seen the news reports constantly. And I think they're doing it for the wrong reason. Because if you're making productivity gains via AI, that's all well and good. But what are you transferring those into? Is it purely into increased profitability, or are you actually passing off some of that to the client? Because if it's the latter, then why are you cutting back on your junior staff? And I know that's a provocative statement, but let me explain that a little bit. Let's say, for instance, I do a project with a client. Traditionally, it's 8 weeks and 4 full-time people on the project. Now, because we're leveraging AI and not the traditional model, it's still going to be 8 weeks just because, quite honestly, clients need time to digest. They want to iterate. They want to have a voice in it all. And you need to share it out with them several times and through several layers to get everybody on board. That's probably not going to change. Any time savings there should be minimal. But you don't need as many people doing the work. And now that's a substantial cost savings for you as a firm. Now, are you still charging the client the same thing for it? That's a key question. Because if you are, then yes, you are going to have to lay people off. But let's say you've just cut your need for people on a project in half or in a third. If your price for that project goes down to a half or a third of what it was, do you think that lower price point is going to increase the demand for your services across a wider client base? If it does so at the same level, which quite honestly, if it's half the price, it should be making more than twice as many people want to buy it. And it's not that these things are finite because it's not a set level of demand. If it's more affordable, more people would want it. Then you probably need the same level of staffing or even more, just doing it at a more productive level. And then you can continue to train up those people over time and make sure that they're available and ready to work. Now, I know it's a bit ironic coming from me because I say that we don't use junior staff, but we don't also require them to go through a traditional consulting model as well. We make sure we bring them from industry to have industry knowledge, or they're from different functions that would translate well into consulting. All of that means that Yeah, a lot of our people may be seasoned, but they still need to be trained in the consulting approach, and we're not going to stop training them in that and just cut off that entire level of the company.
I love that you say this, especially with the focus on, what are you really doing with the gains that you make from using AI at companies.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer that you create far more growth, let's say, and top line and bottom line revenue when you focus on providing more value, not on
Exactly.
cutting costs and reducing, right? You can only reduce as far as zero, hypothetically, but the value you can create is endless as long as you can continue providing more, right? So by saving and by passing off those savings to your clients, potentially by drawing in and attracting more, I mean, the growth seems like it would be a no-brainer rather than
Absolutely.
cutting your people out until your company is all robots and what are they doing and who are they serving?
Yeah, and quite frankly, what's the reason for you charging the same fees at that point as
Yeah,
well?
yeah, because they think they can get away with it. I'm sure, So, right,
I'm sure some of them are. How long is that going to happen?
absolutely.
Depends. Because I think the other thing, David, is that we're also seeing the traditional barriers to entry just completely fall.
Mm.
Now, you still need to be very good in what you do and you need to know something well to consult upon it. But based on what I've just told you, you also don't need to make a big investment in having quite a large number of staff on hand as you scale yourself. You can actually do it with a much more approachable investment that isn't always going to require a private equity to back you, isn't always going to require you to be independently wealthy and put your life savings into it as well until you're up to running and have your sustainable revenue streams in place.
So, Ray, we've highlighted a couple of areas of opportunity that
Mm-hmm.
AI brings to consulting firms. We've highlighted an area of concern as well. But from your perspective, what's the biggest risk for consulting firms integrating AI into their core operations?
So the biggest risk is twofold. I'd say anyone who has been particularly productive with AI knows that it's going to take several weeks of investment in training your agents to be able to work correctly within not just the way that you want things, but to make outputs that really have the rigor that you want. And then you're still going to have people that need to check it over, apply their own judgment to it, and make sure that you challenge it. And I think the best illustration of that comes when if you've sat there and you said, okay, I want to make this, this is what I want you to create for me. Okay, yeah, use this particular format. I think it's strong, it's streamlined, it gets to the point very quickly. Your agent will agree with you. They will tell you, yes, it's direct, it's strong, and it's very highly polished. Then ask it the question, so what's wrong with it? And you obviously will get a very different perspective on what you did. And knowing that it's going to become a people pleaser and you need to turn back and actually know, hey, this is a quality output it produced and not just trust it that it knows better is going to be critical as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So definitely making sure that, I mean, you can't just automate things and hand off tasks that you don't already know how to complete properly, right? So the biggest
Yes.
risk is trying to use it for something that you don't know how to do because you won't recognize and understand the quality of the output, and therein lies the biggest risk, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the funniest was we wanted to test its limits and we said, hey, explain to me how to tie my shoes. And I'm sure you could have gone somewhere if you followed the instructions, but very few of us got to that end based on what we were told. Now, that could mean that we don't think like an AI, and that's our big problem. But then that's going to be the case for anyone who reads your output as a consultant as well.
Where your story covers strategic adaptation, challenging the status quo, and the critical importance of human judgment in a tech driven world. For the growth minded listeners who are navigating their own growth shift, what's the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about embracing disruptive innovation and making intentional decisions for long term success?
I don't know if you got it from our conversation, but I tend to be the eternal optimist and always looking on the bright side and how can I use this and make the most of it. That has to be your foremost the thing that you really keep in your mind and your primary motivation and way of operating. Now, obviously, human beings as a whole aren't the best at dealing with change and adapting to it. That's why the concept of change management is a giant industry that is required with us. But, be a little more open, be a little more welcoming. Think about what good you can gain out of it, and don't look at it pessimistically. And trust me, you will find a way to make things work and to benefit greatly from them that way.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights with the audience today. For anyone listening who might like to learn more about Strategic Partners New York, or might even like to just continue the conversation, what would be the best way to find you?
Sure. Ray.Florio at strategicpartners.com, or you can look us up on our website at strategicpartners.com, and you can also keep track of us on LinkedIn, both my own page and this page for Strategic Partners as a whole.
Right. Thanks again for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, David.
Another powerful conversation on the growth shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.